Okay, so let's continue with our discussions, and let's see how do we proceed from here. Okay, so these things we have discussed. What are the objectives, and how do we move further, and in this particular subject. And also, I think now there will be slight change, I guess, in terms of how this course is to be conducted. I think probably I'll be there for one section, and for other section there will be a visiting faculty. Okay, so till such time visiting faculty is identified, I'll be there. We'll combinedly do it, and probably once we have that visiting faculty, we can split the class. Okay, let's see how it goes. At the moment, we will continue with what we are trying to do. Okay, so yeah, so we were in the first unit, and where where the content is about general introduction about disaster resilience. Okay, what are disasters, and what are the types of disasters, and we have seen this in the last class. Today probably we'll see some of it, some more information on pertaining to India and disaster with a reference to Indian subcontinent. Okay, how disaster occurs, and how the physiological characteristics and also other characteristics make India prone to disasters, and what kind of disasters, and so on and so forth. So still we are in the beginning, in the first unit, where the primary intention of this particular unit is to introduce the basics of disasters, how do we understand disasters and types, and how it is approached, particularly in Indian context. So very quickly we have seen the different types of disaster definitions adapted across the literature and different agencies, and I have been saying that this is one of the important definitions because it is the act pertaining to Indian subcontinent. So where we have seen that all three components. Okay, if you recollect quickly, what is the objective of any disaster measures is to safeguard the life. That's the first priority. Okay, and other things are secondary, like for example, how do you minimize the economic loss and other things, and so on and so forth. Primarily we are looking for how do we save life. Okay, and also we also try to understand what is a disaster. Can we call anything and everything any small event, and for example, let's say heavy rain, any other rain can be classified under a disaster, or do we have any specific condition under which we term this as a disaster? All that we have seen in terms of understanding disasters are concerned. Okay, broadly we have also seen how do we classify this in terms of natural and man-made disasters, and primarily we have seen under natural disasters what are geophysical disaster, hydrological disaster, meteorological disaster, climatological and biological disasters. And like I have been saying in the last class, we have specific typologies to study under first three categories. Okay, that's what we'll try to do in coming weeks. Particularly, we'll study about earthquake and about floods and about cyclones. Okay, so all these things we have seen in last class. Now, what we will see is how India perceives, how is it perceived in Indian context, how disasters are perceived in Indian context, and what steps are taken by the government of India and the nodal agencies in the Indian subcontinents on how do we tackle this particular disaster. Okay, and we'll see this topic in two perspectives. First of all, what are the measures that we take, and what are the, when I say measures, what are the policy measures and what are the initiatives of government of India and state governments on how do we tackle disaster. This is one component of it. The second component of it is the very setting of Indian subcontinent in the region, and also the characteristics of the characteristics of the population, the kind of socioeconomic background that we have, also puts India in vulnerable conditions. Okay, so we'll see in two aspects how India is prone to disasters. Okay, so I've written something. India, due to its physiographic and climatic conditions, is one of the most prone disaster countries in the world. Okay, what do you mean by physiographic conditions? Physiographic conditions is, for example, let us say we have Himalayas here, right? So we have Himalayas here, and that's one of the major landmark, one of the major, if you see from the larger perspective, okay, let's say from the global perspective, Himalayas is one of the landmarks, one of the important element that will have an impact on the other masses. And also, if you see the other way, we have oceans, okay, on both the sides. Okay, so even that will have an impact on how and what kind of disasters that we will natural disasters that we will encounter. Okay. Okay, and also from the climate perspective, there are two words that we have put. One is physiographic condition, the other one is climatic condition. And I'm sure you are all aware how India is divided. I think there is one classification under NBC. Okay, how the Indian subcontinent or India is categorized under different climatic zones. Like, for example, let's say warm and humid, hot and dry, cold and composite climates. Okay, and that also have an implications on how we prepare ourselves for a particular issue, and so on and so forth. Okay, so apart from natural disaster, of course, this is also there, where human induced disaster is also part and parcel of any country. Okay, but we will not be discussing much on that. We'll try to focus primarily on natural disasters. Okay, and I was saying we will look at this topic from two perspectives, like how do we address this, the issue of disaster in Indian context, and how India is vulnerable. Okay, so first we will see the disaster, how do we manage and what measures are taken and so on and so forth, and then we will go into the vulnerability of Indian subcontinent. Okay, so we have a plan called National Disaster Management Plan, NDMP. It's a recent one, 2019 document that covers disaster management cycles for all kinds of disasters pertaining to in India. And of course, it also discusses about the human-made disasters as well, but primarily the focus is on natural disasters. Okay, and what is this document and how this is relevant for us? For example, probably many of us are aware, we do go back to NBC, right? We go back to NBC and refer to those documents for standards. If there is anything missing, let's say, for example, if you have to take a call on what is the kind of climate that we have here, or let's say what is the specific requirement that we need to follow if we are designing a hospital, or if we are designing some structures. We always go back and refer National Building Code, right? And like that, we have a ready reckoner, or kind of a guideline that we have to go and look for every time if we are looking for some information on disaster, and how do we manage that disaster in Indian context. Okay, and it is actually a statutory document. A statutory document, in a sense, is a legal document. For example, NBC is a legal document. We have to satisfy the requirements of NBCs, right? So similarly, it is kind of a legal document. This is prepared based on the National Disaster Management Act 2005. Okay, so that is also coming in. We'll discuss about this particular act in coming slides as well. Okay, so based on the act, a guideline is prepared for the entire country. Okay, so that we are supposed to follow. Okay. Very briefly, how India is vulnerable. If we put the entire Indian subcontinent into context, there are certain things that we should keep in mind apart from the physiological and climate related stuff. Increasing heightened vulnerability to disaster risk can be related to, number one, increasing population. Of course, we all know about this. Okay, probably it is projected that by 2030 will be the most populous country in the world, right? Beating China as well. The second is urbanization. Okay, and I hope the definition or the what is urbanization is clear for everyone. And India is one of the fastest urbanizing countries in the world. Okay, and still we are around 25% of the country which is urban, and we are fastly moving towards probably, let's say, 50% urbanization across the country. Okay, and from economic perspective, probably urbanization may be it may be good. Okay, and from other side, in terms of environmental degradation, ecological issues, and so on and so forth, there are other issues related with urbanization as well. Okay, so that's also one of the issues, and I think we are actually still growing. Okay, we have not our population is not stabilized yet. Okay, so till that time, the urbanization will continue to occur, and we may have to tackle those particular issues. Okay, and of course, industrialization, nothing comes. This cannot be regulated in a very big manner. I won't say like that. This cannot be stopped, or this cannot be curtailed. The only thing we can do is we can just regularize how industrial activity should take place. Okay, because with increasing number of populations and with economic aspirations, okay, industrialization has to occur. Okay, and that will continue to occur. And of course, that will also create lot of issues, environmental and other issues that will induce disaster in large. Okay, and development within high risk zones. Okay, specifically, for example, let's say if there are certain zones which are marked as sensitive zones, like for example Sundarbans, or any sensitive areas, reserve forest areas, or coral reef areas, and so on and so forth, that will also create an issue for us. Okay, and environmental degradation, of course, that is happening. Okay, for various reasons, and so on and so forth. Climate change is another issue that is world is facing, and India is no exception for that. Besides the natural factors, anthropogenic climatic change and various human activities could also aggravate the issue of disaster in Indian context. I hope this word, if you have not heard before, anthropogenic component is associated with the pollutions, okay, and human-induced activities. For example, specifically pollutions and industrial pollutants that we we exhaust. Okay, so that will also have an impact on the natural phenomena. Okay, every time it is not that for example, let us say floods or let's say heavy rain. Heavy rain is a natural phenomena, and probably it will if we have designed our cities and if we have respected the topography. Last time we did discuss about how we alter the topography and how we don't respond to the natural context. And probably if we have respected the nature and if we have understood how the water flows, this will leave slightly lesser impact than the kind of impact that we face now. Okay, why? Because of the human induced activities. So human induced activities actually exaggerates the disasters. Okay, it kinds of aggravates the disaster. Okay, so that's in it's very confusing. Probably let's erase all. Okay, so that's in brief how India is prone to disasters. Okay, so of course increasing population, urbanization, industrialization, and other related stuff like climate change are primary reasons for the increased vulnerability of Indian subcontinent to various disasters. Okay, and the National Disaster Management Act and the National Disaster Management Plan, okay, it has is developed or is made with certain vision for the country. Okay, so what is that vision? The vision is to make India disaster resilient across all sectors. Okay, achieve substantial and inclusive disaster risk reduction. Okay, I think you can check the kind of vocabulary being used here. It does not say eliminate disaster. Okay, it says substantially reduce. Okay, the intention is to make resilient communities. Okay, so because we cannot prevent natural events. Okay, we can only prepare ourselves to be resilient to natural events. Okay, so the vision is to make India resilient across all sectors, achieve substantial and inclusive disaster risk reduction, okay, by building local capacity, starting with poor and decreasing significantly the loss of life. Okay, so again you can check the word the vocabulary used. Okay, reducing the loss of life, that's the first thing. Second, of course, livelihood, the workplace or the livelihoods that we depend on, and so on and so forth. And assets. Third one is the actual properties and so on and so forth. Assets in different forms, including economic, physical, social, cultural, and environmental, while enhancing the ability to cope up with all disasters. Okay, so if you remember, this looks like a slightly modified version of the definition of disaster. Okay, so all the components are there, and this particular sentence is being kind of added here. We are making a community here in this case for the entire India. Okay, we are making India resilient to all kind of disasters. Okay, and our primary intention is to reduce the reduce the impact of disaster that is occurring, and significantly reduce the loss of life. This is the first step. Okay, and livelihoods and the assets related to in the form of economics and physical and social and so on and so forth. Okay, so that is the vision for the country, and in this case probably where are we as an architect, where do we fit in? Okay, this is very very subjective question. Where do architects fit in here? If you ask me, architects fits everywhere. Okay, for example, let us say significantly reduce the loss of life. Okay, so if our buildings are designed in a better way, okay, so or if our cities are planned in a better way, okay, this can aid in reducing the loss of life, right? So of course, and other aspects. For example, let us say if our buildings are designed and cities are planned in a better way, we can reduce the environmental damage or environmental disaster that will follow in any major events. Okay, so we fit in almost everywhere. Wherever there is land, there is a discussion about buildings and cities, architects do fit into that particular definition. Okay, and if you go further into the vision, it says how do we address this particular issue. Okay, we have said here we have to bring resilience in all forms of sectors. Okay, but how do we achieve it? And there is a framework called Sendai's framework. Okay, which is kind of a framework for adapted by India in addressing the disasters in the country. Okay, so in fact this is a universal framework that is there theoretically, and India also has adopted this particular framework for arriving at a comprehensive understanding of disaster and then managing the disasters. So under this framework, the priorities of Sendai's framework and those related to disaster risk reduction in SDGs. What are SDGs? I think these words should be, acronyms should be familiar to you. If not, I think you should pick up these words. Okay, Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, and Sustainable Development Goal 11. I think I'll just leave it here. You can just Google and see what are Sustainable Development Goals and where are buildings, cities under which development goals the city and the buildings fall. Okay, so how India's vision is framed and how we have arrived at a guideline is by taking the Sendai's framework and also related disaster risk reductions in sustainable development goals and also Paris Agreement. Okay, and this is the recent agreement that we have as of now, and 2015. I think there is one recent here also in 2021. I have to check, and have been integrated into planning framework for disaster risk reduction under the following categories. Okay, so in brief, if you have not still understood what I am trying to say here, I said India has developed a framework for understanding the disaster and addressing it, and that framework is developed using Sendai's framework, and also by looking at the Sustainable Development Goals and Paris Agreement, all three put together. And the following using these three primary component, the following thematic areas of have been developed for addressing the issue of disaster, of which the first one is understanding the risk, the second one is interagency coordination, investing in disaster risk reduction through structural measures, investing in disaster risk reduction through non-structural measures. And the fifth one, capacity building, capacity development and building in various stakeholders, and climate change risk management as well. Okay, so all the entire framework, entire policy is developed based on these thematic areas. Okay, so in broad, in a holistic or in a conceptual manner, for example, let us say if a disaster occurs, okay, disaster occurs, what do? We respond to particular disaster, and then in post disaster we try to understand how it has occurred, what can be done, how do we improve that, okay, and what are the kind of physical and other infrastructure or the support that is given to a community to post disaster. Okay, and it will take time, right? It will take time to recover back. Okay, so and then we try to bring in mitigation measures by understanding the disaster, why it has occurred, how it has occurred. We try to intervene in terms of mitigations. It can be in terms of policy mitigation. It can be in terms of physical interventions. Okay, maybe it can be in terms of non-physical and non-structural interventions as well. For example, capacity building can be considered under non-structural interventions. We will be going through all of it in quite some time. What are structural measures, what are non-structural measures, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then we prepare ourselves probably for next disaster. Okay, so there's something called pre-disaster, and then again disaster again. So this is kind of a circle. Okay, so which means that we cannot avoid disasters, but only thing is we can minimize the damage it will cause. Okay, that's the intention of any disaster measures that is taken across the world and also in Indian context as well. Okay, so the National Disaster Management Plan 2019 provides a framework and direction to the government agencies for all phases of disaster management. For example, let us say in all this case, these are actually considered as different phases. Okay, disaster is itself is a phase. Okay, how do we immediate response to how do we do this? What are our responses and how do we respond and what we should respond? Okay, all that is one phase. Post disaster, okay, how do we understand the situation post disaster and how much time it takes for us to recover back, and what are the measures that we can take so that what we have learned from here can be strengthened, and then so that next time if that happens, the impact is the damage is reduced. Okay, and we prepare ourselves for the next disaster. Okay, so that's the cycle, and the entire this framework is developed with this idea, conceptual idea. Okay, and if you see the Disaster Management Act 2005, there are certain specific things that is mentioned in the act. Okay, I told you in the beginning. So act, based on this act, disaster management act 2005. Okay, the framework has been prepared. The framework for addressing disaster management across the country is prepared. So what does act say? What are the primary things that act say about disaster, and how the act demands every state government or the central government to prepare itself for disaster. Okay, so we have something called national plan, which is there are certain objectives written. First one is measures to be taken for prevention of disaster or mitigation of their effects. Okay, the national plan should include this. Okay, measures taken for prevention of disaster, measures taken for integration of mitigation measures. Second one, prevention, mitigation, measures taken for preparedness and capacity building. Third one, okay, and roles and responsibilities of stakeholders, so that they can address this particular issue. Okay, so this is the primary intention of any national plan, not any national plan, the disaster management plan for India is concerned, is developed based on this. Okay, so the national plan includes prevention measures, mitigation measures, preparedness and how to prepare, and how do we do capacity building for various stakeholders, and who are responsible and who are decision makers. Okay, this may look very weak. Okay, this may look weak, or this may look odd man out of this objective. Okay, but actually this is one of the most important component when it comes to any issue. Okay, particularly disaster as well. Okay, for example, let us say in planning, there is a saying, what is the first step in planning? Okay, the first step in planning is to decide that I should make a plan. Okay, so every step, in every step there is a decision involved. Okay, so for example, let us say if we have to make a disaster management plan for a specific city, what is the first step? First step is to have such vision of making plan for a city. Okay, so this is very, very crucial, because here the role of decision makers are really important, where any delay in decision making may lead to more issues, more disasters. Okay, so these are the primary things that is mentioned in Disaster Management Act for having a plan for the country. Okay, and there are 14 points that has been developed based on this particular objectives that is given in the act. There are 14 points that has been developed as a part of national, I think I have written it wrong, it's NDMP, okay, National Disaster Management Plan. I think this has to be corrected, National Disaster Management Plan. Okay, so there are some 14 points that has been developed based on the objectives what we have seen from the Act in 2005. What is the first step? Is to improve the understanding of disaster or the risk and the vulnerability. Okay, this is the first thing, and I think this is one of the primary things that we should have our understanding on. Okay, understanding on disaster and risk, which are considered to be hazards, which are vulnerable areas, who are vulnerable, how do we define risk, and which will be considered as a disaster, and how do we classify them. All that needs thorough understanding, and it is not a static understanding. Okay, it's not one time understanding. The understanding has to be dynamic. Okay, because with increasing, like technology, right, like technology is increasing day by day, and new features are added to our phones and mobiles and so on and so forth. The the kind of risk, the kind of disaster that we face is complex. Okay, we cannot have the same understanding that we had 10 years back to understand an issue now. Okay, we have to improve our understanding. Okay, this is the first thing that is recommended, or that's part of National Disaster Management Plan. Okay, the second one, strengthen disaster risk governance at all levels. Okay, like I said, the stakeholders responsible for taking decisions, preparing cities, and preparing different mitigation related measures, okay, or preparing the cities and communities for a particular disaster is all very important. Okay, so strengthening the disaster risk governance, okay, that is one of the points that we should be addressing on. Investing in disaster risk reduction, okay, for resilience through structural and non-structural and financial measures, as well as comprehensive capacity development program. Okay, and this is one of the area where we have been working on, and if you remember, I have told we got funding from European Union. We got around 1.5 crores of money for capacity building programs. Okay, under Birucom, building resilient urban communities. What we did there was to study different communities across India and in Austria for different disasters, different issues, and then we have developed a national level professional development programs. Okay, we have developed and we have conducted as well. I think more than 12 professional development programs were conducted on how do we do capacity building for professionals who are part and parcel of the government. Okay, so why this is important? This is important because, for example, let's say today we are learning about this, and you will be spending time. You will be studying about this particular subject. You may come out with some new ideas on how do we address the issue of disaster. Okay, but that idea has to ultimately percolate down to the one who takes decisions. Okay, so if we do a lot of research and keep it with ourselves, and if it is not reaching the ones who are in need of such assistance, there is no use of such research, right? So whatever we do, ultimately it should reach out to the correct stakeholders. Okay, so this is one of the important areas, and in fact, just to highlight this part, there are a lot of funding opportunities under this topic. Okay, and if let's say you have certain skills and you have developed that scientific skills, and then you want to promote that skill, and you think that will help the city management and other stakeholders in managing the disasters, we have a lot of funding in that aspect. Okay, for capacity building. What is capacity building? I think I hope you all must have understood. If not, let us say sorry. Okay, let us say I have been working in this particular department, let's say for 10 years, okay, and my understanding is whatever I have learned is 10 years old, isn't it? Okay, and like I have been saying, technology has changed, our understanding has changed, the kind of scientific temperament that we had, all have changed, okay, and the disaster that the way in which I have been trained to look at the disaster is different from the way now it is seen, right? So there is a gap between what I see from 10-year-old understanding from what others see from current understanding, okay. How do we bridge this gap? Okay, it's all through capacity building only. Okay, it's like in a very, if you have to say in a very simple word, it's like a conducting training programs for professionals, because these professionals are the ones who make the decisions, okay. So those decision makers have to be have current understanding and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of funding in this aspect. Okay, so that's the third one. Investing on disaster risk reduction. It can be in the form of capacity building, or it can be in the form of structural and non-structural measures. Enhance disaster preparedness, okay, and promote build back better. Okay, what is build back better? So if you remember, we have seen one diagram. We saw disaster, and then we said prepare for disaster. Okay, and there is a lot of other steps involved in this. Let us say we are struck by a disaster, and we have assessed it. We have developed our understanding based on the damage it has caused, and then we have created certain mitigations, okay, and we have prepared ourselves for in a better way. Next time it happens, let us say in terms of points, in terms of numbers, let's say in the first case, on a scale of 1 and 10, okay, we had an we got struck by a scale of disaster 7, okay, and we have prepared our cities and buildings and so on and so forth. Next time it occurs, let us say the scale in which it can be measured is 6, okay. This is a huge success as far as the making the city better is concerned, okay. So the intention is build back better. So when we are stuck with disaster, okay, next time and we have learnt about it, and we are trying to mitigate, and then we build our cities in such a way that next time if it happens, the intensity, the damage of intensity is not going to be the same, okay. We are better placed to cope up this particular disaster. That's the intention, okay. It's not like we make this zero, okay. It's not possible that we can eliminate all the damages caused and so on and so forth. However, we can substantially reduce the loss of life. That's the primary intention. Okay, what are the other things that is mentioned? Prevent disaster, okay, and achieve substantial reduction of disaster risk in terms of life, livelihood, health assets, in terms of economic, physical, social, cultural, and environmental. Increase resilience and prevent emergence of new disaster risk in that particular area. Okay, increase resilience. This is the hot topic as on date. Sustainability was very hot topic. Still, it's a hot topic. Now, it is slowly getting replaced by resilience. Okay, promote the implementation and integration. Promote the implementation of integrated and inclusive economic, structural, legal, social, educational, cultural, environmental, political, and institutional measures to prevent and reduce hazard and exposure. Okay, the word inclusive is important, and here inclusive means it inclusive of all sects of people, okay, from marginalized society to rich and so on and so forth, okay, from vulnerable society to all the well-off societies, okay. So we should have a common plan where inclusive development is done, not in an isolated manner, okay. So this is very, very important. Other things that is mentioned in the framework: empower the local authorities and communities as partners to reduce and manage the disaster, okay. This is also one of the things that we should understand. For example, let us say if all the decisions are taken from the center, okay, and we have to wait for that decisions to be communicated to us before we act locally, okay. So decentralization is one of the steps that is required in case of empowering the local authorities so that they can take a decision based without waiting for the other hierarchical structures, okay. So that's important. Empowering the local community. Strengthen the scientific and technical capabilities in all aspects of disaster management and so on. This is one of the important topic and relevant also. When we talk about capacity building programs, we get back here, okay. What are the new tools that we have for understanding disaster, and how do we address this particular disaster, and how do we quantify disasters, and what are the technological and technical advancements that we have for understanding a disaster, okay. So this is one of the important things that we should consider. And of course, capacity development for all levels to effectively respond to multiple hazards in the community. And there are the things: provide clarity on roles and responsibilities, okay. And here we have said empower the local community, and here we have said provide clarity on who will take what decisions. This is also very, very important, and it has to be spelled out, or it has to be clearly or explicitly written who will take a call, okay. For example, let's say in case of Chennai disaster, Chennai flood 2015, one of the what do you say, one of the point that was brought, one of the point that was discussed in the media and other thing is the delay in making decisions, okay. There was some delay in making some decisions, crucial decisions, that aggravated the flood, okay. So like I said, if we should strictly follow this decentralization of decision making powers, okay, so that local authorities or local stakeholders can take a call instead of waiting for the central decision makers to take a call. This is a very sensitive topic, okay, but still we have to understand that the local community or the local people who are there at the disaster site can understand the issue much better than the one who's sitting in an office, okay, and making a call. Okay, so that's important, okay. Provide clarity on who will take decisions and who are responsible for taking decisions at right time, Okay. Promote culture of disaster risk prevention and mitigation at all levels. Okay, and that's what we are trying to do here also. This particular subject is introduced to sensitize you to look at your design problems from disaster perspective as well. Okay, so every time you make a decision, or you make a design decisions, and if there is an opportunity for you to do something, that will help in reducing the disaster, reducing the exposure to disaster, or reduce the loss of life, you should make a call on that. Facilitate the mainstreaming of disaster management concerns into planning and development process. Okay, so that's why this subject is also introduced, where the idea of disaster, the concepts of disaster, how do we understand this, how it can percolate down into design and planning process is important. Okay, so I think all these things are put under different timelines. Okay. What are those timelines? For example, let us say time frame in which the national disaster management plan has been prepared, so that we have certain goals and we try to achieve it. Okay. For example, let us say the act has been prepared in 2005, so which means it's already more than 15 years now, more than 16 years now, right? So how this act, which is prepared 15-16 years back, how it has percolated down into the specific thing. For example, let us say how it has percolated down into this planning and design aspect is important. So if you see from the overall time frame perspective, the framework has been done in such a way that the implementation of measures in the plan must be completed within the short time. Okay, there are certain things that has been kept as a short time measures. Okay, and there are certain things which has been kept under long time measures and medium term measures, and there are certain things which is kept under long term measures. Okay, many of the structural measures, capacity building measures will come under the medium term interventions, and there are certain specific, for example, let us say short term measures are disaster has occurred, okay, and we have understood, okay, how it occurs, and there are certain steps that needs to be taken so that next time if it occurs, we do not have the same issues. Okay, and I think it has not been reviewed yet how this has been done. Okay, maybe in 2023 we may have a review, or maybe in this year itself probably we may have a review on how this target has been achieved, whether we have from the Indian context, whether this has been achieved or not. Okay, yeah, I think I will stop here, and I'll leave the floor open for questions. If you have any questions, we can take them.